Hey, what's up friends? Hope you are doing well. Today we are using JavaScript in order to implement this feature which allows the user to easily share selected text, in this case to Twitter, but could be of course to any social media. This feature is quite common especially in blog sites, and it helps websites gain exposure, grow traffic, increase search engine rankings, and all the good stuff. I hope you guys will enjoy this video and get some value out of it. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and without further ado, let's go! So this is our starting point. In the project folder, I've created three files, the index.html, style.css, and the main.js files. In the index.html file, I typed some basic HTML5 boilerplate code, inserted the title, share selected text, and linked the external files to the document, the font awesome icons, and the style.css and main.js files. Both of them are currently empty. Also notice that instead of placing the script element in the body right above the closing body tag, I placed it in the head using the defer attribute, and we can now proceed to defining the body markup. All we'll need here is basically some dummy content, so let me paste and quickly go through. Everything will be contained within a container, an h1 heading, an h2 subheading, an hr element in order to draw a horizontal line separating heading and content, and a div containing a few paragraphs with lorem ipsum text. Notice that at some point in the second paragraph, here we are, I've added some English text in order to make testing a bit easier for those of us who don't speak Latin. So this could be, for example, some article in a blogging website. And now let's add the button which will allow the user to share the selected text. We will only add one button here, but could be a group of buttons allowing the user to share selected text to multiple places, or even enabling user to perform other actions with selected text, such as copying to clipboard or converting selected text to speech so that user can listen to it. Actually, this could be interesting topics for future videos, we'll see. Now, the purpose of this button is to allow the user to share selected text to Twitter, so let's add the corresponding font awesome icon as its content. And finally, for easier access, let's add an ID to the button, Twitter share button, although in this specific case it's not necessary since we only have one button in our project. Notice that the button is a direct descendant or a child of the body, and eventually it will be absolutely positioned relative to the body. Okay, let's open the project in the browser. For this purpose, I'm using the live server, which is a Visual Studio Code extension. So this is what we've created up to this point. And let's add some styling with CSS. Styling is not the main objective of this video, so let me paste and quickly go through. I will of course include a link in the description to this project. We start by resetting padding and margin to 0, as well as box sizing to border box for all elements, some basic styling for the body. This part is completely irrelevant to the main objective, just adding some basic styling for the dummy content elements, some padding for the container, font size and margin for headings, and we also style the horizontal line as well as the paragraph elements. And by the way, a while ago I've created a video explaining in detail how to use the linear gradient CSS function. Feel free to check it out. Now, regarding the share button, again some basic styling, but what's most remarkable in my opinion is its positioning. So the button is absolutely positioned relative to the body. For starters, I placed it to the top left corner, although this is not really necessary since it will be repositioned each time before it is displayed. Z-index is also defined just in order to ensure that it will be on top of the content, and its display property is set to none. So this is the result with CSS styling. Button is currently not displayed, but if we comment this out, here it is. Also notice that on hover, we reverse color and background color. We also set pointer events to none for icon elements inside the share button, since we are only interested in events over the parent element, the button. And finally, I've created this button entrance animation so that button will zoom in whenever the button entrance class is added to it. Now, this is of course not necessary, and actually one might argue that there shouldn't be an entrance animation since text is selected instantly, so this is just a matter of preference. I am not adding an exit animation since there could be some weird implications, for example in the case where user quickly selects and unselects text, and some styling for smaller screens. Okay, let's proceed to actually implementing the feature to share selected text. We first need to decide which area will allow for selectable text. Could be the entire body, or we could start being a bit more specific by setting the container div to be a valid selectable text area, or we could narrow it down even more to the main content, or even to each paragraph or some of the paragraphs. Now, for this example, let's set this part to be a valid selectable text area as well as the H1 heading. For this purpose, we will add the selectable text area class to each element we want to set as selectable text area. Notice that we didn't use this class in CSS styling, it will only be used in JavaScript, and some people prefer somehow distinguishing pure JavaScript classes, perhaps by adding a JS prefix. Just a matter of preference. You choose your style and try to be consistent. And I think we are set. Let's move on to JavaScript. For starters, let's store selectable text area elements as well as the Twitter share button into variables for easier access. Here we are. Notice the use of the query selector all method in order to select all elements with the selectable text area class. I suppose I could use plural here since this is now a list containing all selectable text area elements. However, I prefer singular, and Twitter share button represents the Twitter share button element. Let's first take care events over the selectable text area elements. For this purpose, we can use the for each method in order to go through each element of selectable text area list and add the event listeners we want to each element. We are only interested in a mouse up event since this is the point where we want to check whether text was selected and if yes, to display the share button. So whenever there is a mouse up event over a selectable text area element, we want to call the selectable text area mouse up function. We will implement this function right now. And by the way, note that this would also work on touch screens since touch devices also support classic mouse events. Although we could optimize with touch events, this is beyond the scope of this video. And let's proceed to implementing this function. On a mouse up over a selectable text area, we want to retrieve what the user has selected. as far as any textual content. For this purpose, we can use the getSelection method over the window object, which returns a selection object representing the range of text selected by the user. We can get the actual selected text by turning the selection into a string. We can do this by using the toString method over the selection. And let's also trim the result in order to remove white space from both sides of the string. And let's console log selected text in order to see what we get. Here we are, all this is selectable text area, and let's open DevTools with F12. So if I select the first two words, lorem ipsum, I'm still holding the mouse down, I'm releasing it right now. Here we are, we get the text. If I select this text over here and release the mouse now, again we get the text. If I just click, we get an empty string. If I select this part, recall this is not selectable text area, and I release, nothing happens. However, this is selectable text area, and if I release the mouse, we get the text. Very nice. If I select an empty space, we get an empty string. Now, just out of curiosity, let's see what happens if an anchor element text is selected. So, for example, let's include the word libero within an A tag. And if we select this part, which includes the anchor element, we can see that anchor text is normally treated as text. Similar behavior would occur if this was button text. So again, if we select this part, which includes the button, here we are. Okay, but what if we had an image? So let's add an image over here and see the result. In this case, an empty space is added in the place of the image. However, this behavior is not the same across all browsers. For example, I also tested for Firefox, and in that case, the alt attribute text is added instead. Okay, let's proceed. So, if text was selected, and one way to check this would be by checking whether the length of selected text string is greater than 0. So if selected text.length, and in this case we want to display the share button. So let's set display property of Twitter share button to block. And if I select some text, indeed the button is displayed. However, let's be a bit more thoughtful regarding the positioning of the button, and let's position it where the mouse up event occurred. We can get the mouse up event coordinates by using the event.pageX and event.pagey properties respectively. Note that this returns the position of the mouse in pixels relative to the document. At first, I tried using the event.clientX and clientY properties, which, however, return the position of the mouse in pixels relative to the viewport, so it only worked as intended if no scrolling was involved. Otherwise, I didn't get the intended behavior. And now we can reposition the share button before displaying it by setting its left property to X, but this is just a number, so we could concatenate, or alternatively we could use template literals And similarly, we can set the top property to Y pixels. Much better, but I would prefer to move it a bit further to the left and to the top. So if width and height for the button is 40 pixels, let's move it 20 pixels to the left and 50 pixels to the top. Nice, but instead of hard coding values here, let's get the button's width and height and do the calculations. I will paste this part in order to save some time. So for Twitter share button width, we use the window object method getComputedStyle in order to get the width of Twitter share button. This will return the width followed by the letters px, and in order to remove the last two letters, we use the slice method. Alternatively, we could use the substring method. And finally, we convert the result to a number so that it can be used in the calculation here. Similarly for the height. So let's replace 20 here with Twitter share button width times 0.5 and 50 with Twitter share button height times 1.25. And finally, let's also add the entrance animation by adding the button entrance class over the Twitter share button. And this is what we get. You can of course define your own rules for positioning the button. And let's check, for example, how a couple of other websites treat this option. This is Seth Godin's blog. It is not a programming blog. Seth Godin is an author into the field of marketing / inspiration / creativity / thinking out of the box, etc. So if we select some text, we can see that positioning of share buttons is quite similar to what we did. Nice. And let's also check how the Medium website handles sharing options. So by selecting some text, sharing options, and by the way, it's not just sharing, but let's call it sharing options, are positioned in the middle of our selection. If our selection extends to more than one lines, then sharing options are positioned in the middle of the first line where selection was initiated. If our selection extends to more than one paragraphs, then we don't get any sharing options. So it is up to you to decide how you want to position sharing options. My only suggestion would be to try to keep it practical. Okay, let's continue with our project. We now want the sharing button to go away when text is unselected. For this purpose, we want to listen for a mouse down event over the entire document. And whenever there is a mouse down event, we want to call the document mouse down function. And let's implement this function right now. So in this case, we expect any selected text to be unselected, and therefore we want to set the display property of the button to none, and to also remove the button entrance class. And we also want to ensure that the selection object is now empty. We can do this using the empty method over the selection object. This is equivalent to using the remove all ranges method. Nice. However, we don't want this procedure to take place upon every mouse down event in the document. We only want it to happen if share button is currently displayed. And we also want to ensure that event target was not the share button itself, because in this case button would disappear before the click event was triggered. Okay, let's check the result by selecting some text button shows up, and on a mouse down event anywhere in the document, indeed button goes away. Now, one edge case I discovered is a case where I select some text, move away from selectable text area and release the mouse. As expected, share button is not displayed since mouse up occurred beyond the boundaries of selectable text area. However, if now I click on the selected text and release the mouse, we can see that despite the fact that text was unselected, share button is displayed. And this is happening because on mouse up there still seems to be text selected. One way to get around this would be to include the mouse up handling into a set timeout method with 0 delay. So let's check the result. Okay, we didn't break anything, and now I'm selecting some text, moving away from selectable text area and releasing the mouse. And now if I click on selected text, we can see that share button is not displayed, and this was the intended behavior. Excellent. All that remains now is to implement the share to Twitter functionality upon a click event over the share button. So let's quickly do this. And let's start by adding an event listener for a click event over the Twitter share button. And in this case, we want the Twitter share button click function to be executed. We will implement this function right now. So this is the general Twitter share URL. Of course, not all query fields are necessary. So let's start forming the URL by storing the various parts into variables. Let's add this part into a variable called Twitter share URL. Next, let's store the selected text into a variable called text. And let's set URL to be the current page URL. And let's add some random hashtags. And via, let's add my Twitter username. Coding journey. Unfortunately, coding journey was already taken. And all that remains now is to use the open method over the window object and assemble the general Twitter share URL. For this purpose, I'm using template literals, and I will just paste this part since everything is quite straightforward. So let's save and check the result. Let's share this part. Here we are. Notice that text is initially highlighted so that we can easily modify it. Here is the URL, the hashtags, and the username. Also notice the Twitter share URL we just assembled, which is of course URL encoded. Very nice. Now it would be better to encode text before adding it to the URL, since it could contain characters which could mess things up, such as a hashtag. So let's use the encode URI component global function. And let's do the same for URL. Okay, let's make sure that everything still works fine. Very nice. Now, if we wanted more flexibility in forming the default to it, for example, instead of the word via, we might wanted to use the word by here. Well, in this case, we could include everything in the text field. And let's quickly do this. Let's copy this line and comment it out. We remove this part since everything will be included in the text field. After the text, let's add the username and let's say by at. I think URL encoding for the at character would be %sign and 40. However, it will not cause any problems, so let's keep it like this. Next, let's add the hashtags. This will be a bit tricky. First, let's split the string into an array. Notice that separator is comma with an empty space. So up to this point, we end up with an array containing the hashtag words. And let's use the map method in order to go through each hashtag word and add the URL encoded hashtag symbol. And finally, let's join array elements into a string using an empty space as separator. And we are done with hashtags, and let's also add the URL. Okay, let's check the result. Here we are. Notice that now all content is highlighted, since now everything is considered to be text. So this is how you can modify the default to it. We can also, of course, specify whether we want this to open in a new window as well as the features for the new window. For this purpose, we should define the second and third parameters for the open method. And let's use this example, which is a bit shorter. Second parameter is a name for the window. Let's name it Share on Twitter. And third parameter is the features for the new window. Let's use a variable for this purpose. Here we are. Okay, let's check the result. Here we are, and of course we could position the window anywhere we wanted. However, to be honest, I prefer the default behavior anyway, before defining the second and third parameters for the open method. And guys, I think we are done. Let's actually tweet something in order to celebrate. Let's tweet this. And let's open Twitter. Here we are, tweeted. Looks wonderful, doesn't it? I think this tweet will get me to at least 10k followers in the next few hours. Let's see. I really hope you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. If you did, please hit the like button and share it with anyone who might be interested. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you want more. For any questions, suggestions, or just to say hi, you can use the comment section below. Till next time, keep coding, keep improving, and enjoy the journey. Take care. Bye.